This podcast is a Jeff Townsend media production.
Well, welcome to the new. We kind of saved this thing. It's like revived, Fuzz. I think it was dead. So we brought it back to life. Podcasting sucks. I'm Jeff Townsend. Joining me is my good friend, Mayor McFuzz. I will let him introduce himself a little bit more, though.
Clear! We're bringing this back to life, baby. It is the all-new, totally revived Podcasting Sucks. Jeff, I'm happy to be doing an actual podcast with you. We've been doing the Podcasting Power Hour for months now, and but now we're doing our first actual podcast, which is pretty cool.
We've been talking about it, yeah, for several months. We've thrown out a lot of ideas. Then I brought you in on this nightmare, and I had been talking with Tanner about this, and he wasn't taking you serious, and he took you serious, so I'm happy.
He did. When I reached out and said, "Hey, Tanner, I have money," and he was like, "Oh, you guys are serious."
Yeah, I mean, why would I ask him?
Let's just do it. And so I'm out a couple mil. Well, we're both out, but here we are. We're here today, and we've got this awesome. Well, we don't technically actually have the URLs yet because Tanner's been busy, so he hasn't been able to give them to us.
That'll happen eventually. Don't worry.
Soon, my friend. It is great to talk to you about. We kind of today want to talk about. We'll talk about a few things. One, there's been kind of a rash of bigger podcasters in the podcasting about podcasting space who have recently podfaded, like as of this week. And it's kind of a big deal. There's also been a podcasting host that is podfading, and that's also really big news. And so we kind of want to talk about that. It's kind of funny to talk in our first episode about podfade, but we'll talk about why it's difficult, how to battle podfade, and maybe talk about our own personal stories, because I think we've each had shows that we've started and have cast off into the sunset, right?
Yeah, it's not easy to maintain, really, Fuzz. It's a battle. It's a daily battle, and the more you get into the grind, you really want to see things pay off, and you might have high expectations in your mind, and that can really play with your head a little bit on top of any other issues you might be going through in life.
I think there's also the times when you are going through things in life and you feel that you're going to let people down by not doing this work, when in actuality, we don't owe anything to anyone, right? None of us do. So Tanner didn't, Evo Terra didn't. The things that they created for us, we enjoyed, but they didn't owe it to us to create that. And they didn't owe it to us to get up every day and do this thing. And we don't either. And you don't listening either. And that said, first of all, you have to take care of yourself first, right? Whether that's life, family life, work life, or just you feel it's the right time to say, you know what, I did a good thing and it's time to do another good thing. And, or sometimes you have a stoicism podcast that gets 1 million downloads and 44 episodes, and you're like, you know what? Peace out.
And I think it's significant. Obviously Evo Terra he's a podcasting Hall of Famer. He's been in it since 2004, 2005. I mean, just crazy long run at it. And a lot of his frustration was keeping up with all the changes that we constantly see, not with just podcasting, but really content creation is constantly changing. So I know that was part of his. Do I sound about correct there on my assumption there?
Yeah. I mean, from his Twitter post, it was keeping up with the changes. There's so many technology changes. And it sounds like he wants to go do something that he enjoys and take, go into he's not going to stop podcasting. It's just that his focus is going to be on something that he truly enjoys. And I respect the hell out of that. I think I do a podcast. My listeners to that podcast might be, dismayed to hear that. But again, I don't technically owe them anything. They're not paying for it. And I do a podcast about good things that are happening locally. I've had 3 no-shows for podcast interviews in this season, and it's tough. It's like, I run a business, I have a family, and it takes time to do these things. And it kind of just starts to wear on you. I can see why, and I appreciate that Evo in particular is going to something that he enjoys. And obviously Tanner's thing is something he enjoys, but also is getting a whole bunch of downloads on. He found the right, niche for that. And kudos to both of them.
Yeah. And I think Tanner's, like you said, exit is a little bit different. Tanner Campbell, our good friend. This is a really tough space to be in, what we're doing in particular, what I was doing. And I remember when I first met Tanner, I really tried to bring him in to this Twitter community, which has its pros and cons, right? Because you will give so much of your time, but you have to really understand the fact that you're probably not going to get back all that you give. And I think that was really hard on Tanner sometimes, because he did spend a lot of time. He did come up with a lot of different helpful things for, as I've coined the phrase, I guess, indie podcaster community. But it's frustrating as hell, man.
All the things that he did in that regard, he did because of a love for this field, I'd say, or he didn't have to do that. And I'm not putting him up on a pedestal. There are a ton of people that do this stuff. Ariel, Brian Bartoletta, James Cridland, like everybody lends their voice. Anybody who's been on the Podcasting Power Hour and has come on and said, like, here's how to help. They do it because they enjoy it. And we're doing this because we enjoy it. But yeah, it does become a kind of a thankless thing when you start helping, this particular niche. You're not going to hear a Blue Chew sponsorship ahead of this, or, pick one into it or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Because
the numbers aren't there to do that, but we enjoy talking about it. And here we are. So hopefully we can, make a few bucks, at least have our hosting and some gear paid for, but it's not going to put a roof over our heads. It's going to just be something that we enjoy to do.
My approach is a little bit different than what Tanner's was. I mean, I've made some money off of Indie Podcaster, right? But a completely different approach. It was just working directly with advertisers, sponsors, whatever you want to call it, that related to the field of podcasting. Tanner, and there's nothing wrong with it, but he was actually trying to use it as a flow stream into his business, right? So he's offering these courses and all these different things. But it's a tough when people don't want to spend a lot of money, in particular people that are just started podcasting. Which is who he interacted with a whole lot. I think he was probably prefer like the middle ground a little bit.
Yep.
But it's hard to convince people to spend money when they first start doing podcasting, even though they have other hobbies that are way more freaking expensive, man. They'll drink a beer, playing golf. All that's more expensive than podcasting. But if you're serious about it as a hobby, then you're probably going to be willing to spend a little bit. But I think that was really tough for him because he was trying to funnel it down a different kind of business avenue. So, I mean, that's really, I guess I'll sum it up with that.
My wife's podcast, and she's on her 5th season, and we're at, 100 and some odd episodes, but it's about free technology that teachers can use in order to help them teach. But it's hard to say, hey, buy this thing when we're talking about like, hey, you're a teacher and have no money. Here's some tools that you can use that are free. But what we've found is that because of that, so her model is speaking engagements. So she gets to either go do professional development for people, or she earns, speaking engagements at big conferences, and she gets, money for that. But the show itself is pretty much just a loss leader in that we're not, and so it's hard to say each week, like we're doing this, but we're not seeing a return for every episode, that income come in. We did recently install AdSense on our website, so we are seeing some good funds coming through the ads that Google runs on her website. But from the show itself, we're not getting any actual income, and it's tough to say, like, we're doing all this, but what are we? What are the fruits of our labor? And I think that's tough for everybody, right?
You're an advertising guy, Fuzz. You've been in it for a long time. I feel like we have all this new technology, which is great because we can really learn more about who we're trying to advertise to. But at the end of the day, we sometimes lose sight on the boots on the ground sort of work. And that's, I think, what I realized with doing this, the fundamentals, just going back to the basics and working with people directly. My big thing was not to sell them on courses or something. It was to get, if they want to support me, listen to my stuff, right? The more you listen to my stuff, the more I can sell this niche to advertisers. But I think we can lose sight of that fundamental values of putting in the work in the right area that matches the niche. If that sounds what I'm saying, if that makes sense, what I'm saying.
Yeah, definitely. And we in the, in this particular circle talking about podcasting and podcasting about podcasting, our audience tends to be people who are talking about other things, right? So
Yep.
if we're all talking to each other, it's just, one big kind of closed circle.
Attaboys for everybody.
Yeah, exactly. So we have people that are talking about financial things. We have people that are talking about, plumbing and all these kind of different things. Going to those niches and saying that there was that person you had on the Podcast Garage show that you had for a while in the plumbing space.
You're going to talk about the Get Fleshed?
Yeah, Get Fleshed. Yeah. Like that guy, he knew his niche. He went after those sponsors and he had it down, has it down pat. And I wish there were more people in there, like very tight. And I think Greg is probably like, his mind is blowing right now. You can see just, the Jim McMahon head blown up. But he's totally right, like going after those sponsors. If you have a quality show and you're doing it right, you can make some good money in that if your space has the money, right?
Well, but both of these guys had, let me go back on that. They had much higher quality shows than I do. Let me just throw that out there.
Sure.
They were good. They were great. But like you said, it's also what you're selling, right? Pete and this Get Flush we're talking about, it's the sanitation porta potty industry. That costs a lot more than what we're doing. So you're right. It's understanding that and trying to use that in your advantage as much as you can, realizing the downside of it, I guess you could say.
Yeah, exactly. So, Jeff, how many podcasts have you had in your past that you're no longer doing?
I think this will be the 16th podcast or 17th I've been a part of. And I'm only doing a couple others now. So you can probably figure it's been a lot.
Yeah.
Some fade naturally.
Yep.
Some fade because they have to. And then some just fade because you do. So to me, like Podfade is a lot of different things. It can be forced upon you. But in regards to what we're talking about here, just the mental aspect, certainly for Tanner, because of the amount of work he was putting in, and Evo is just trying something else, obviously, but it's happened a lot, man. A handful of them. It's like you try to go into every podcast like we do, but if you're a new podcaster, you don't, but you try to go into everything with a strategy. You go into everything with a plan. And when that doesn't work out, you're like, oh crap, it starts to really weigh on you. Yep. And then you'll see mild success. Then it happens again. Oh crap. And after a while, after so much crap, it's easy to be held down by crap.
Exactly. And that wasn't about Get Flushed, because his show's about crap, and that's making a whole bunch of money.
Trying to see how much times I could drop crap. Sorry.
We're teetering the line of having to put that a little explicit box on.
Yeah. Well, I kept it clean.
Get Flushed. So when I've only had 2 shows that have pod faded, but they were both pretty long running. One was like my OG podcast that I started in 2005 or 6 when I was hand coding an RSS feed and doing it for when I was on the radio station. And I did that for I did the podcast portion of that for 6 years back then. And it was tough, but I learned a whole lot about website programming and coding and all those things working on it. So, nothing was lost in those terms, but and then I had a really fun comedy podcast about fatherhood that, pod faded because the co-host that I was with had some family issues of his own and had to step back so he could focus on his kids and take on his new life in that role. And so it naturally pod faded because of that. But thankfully, what I have now, I haven't had to pod fade any of them, though there are certain things that I dread doing. And then it's like, well, do I need to do that? It goes back to what we talked about earlier, right? What are some things what are kind of the signs that you've seen when it's time to shut her down?
I do want to go back just a little bit and say that when I've experienced this pod fade, a lot of time it's been, man, when I'm trying to do something solo. So in the case of both the people we actually mentioned specifically, they are doing solo things. to me, it's a difficult grind to do. And I actually like the co-host thing because you have somebody there to, from accountability standpoint, somebody else that you're doing it for. But doing solo stuff, as you know, Fuzz, is really freaking hard. And for me, that's what led to a lot of my Podfade. And, how do I start realizing it's Podfade? It's pretty simple. You just dread doing it.
Yep.
You just dread doing it. It becomes a task. Or if you have a co-host involved and they start dreading doing it, and then you know that you're going to be vulnerable to that Podfade. That's why when you have a podcast with somebody, it's not easy to do because it's a long-term commitment in most cases if it's going to be successful. And that's a lot to count on somebody else for. So no, to answer your question, you just start not wanting to do it, or you feel that your partner's not wanting to do it.
Yep. When we were talking about doing a podcast together, we had a whole bunch of ideas that were, if we had a team of people to create it, would be super cool. If we had the time in our personal lives and, we maybe podcasting was the only thing that we did and we had some assistance, that would have been really cool. But we also both knew, thankfully, that we could probably get away with 10, 20, 30 episodes, but it wouldn't have been sustainable because the things that we wanted to do were too grandiose. And so doing something like this where we can just get on and talk about the things that we enjoy and not have to put too much production work into it, not have to, we're 17 minutes into this podcast and we don't have to worry about going for another 90 minutes to make this show happen, so those kind of things I think help take the pressure off so you can keep it going and keep it enjoyable. And also, it's like at any moment though, like I could have some work issue or, family issue or something that I've got to take care of. And same with you. And, these kind of things happen and you know what? Life comes first. So
we also have, and I think it's important to avoid Podfade. We have friends, acquaintances that would step in and help and cover us. And you'll certainly hear that on Good Morning Podcasters and Podcasting Sucks. Other people will be involved. And just like on Indie Podcaster, whenever I had an issue, somebody would step in and help. So I think that's also important to have a contingency plan on how to handle those matters. If you're just completely 100% solo, it's hard not to drown.
I 100% agree. What are some things, Jeff, that you do when you start to feel that pod fade in order to kind of get yourself amped up about podcasting again?
I've been known to take a break for a month or two at a time, and somehow it doesn't impact the engagement or the downloads, I guess you could say. I don't know why, but I think podcasting seems to be like a little bit more lenient, right? It's not like radio and things like that. It seems like people that listen to podcasts are more acceptable of those kind of things. It seems like it, at least. So it's nothing wrong with taking a step back for a while. And I think the other big thing is trying to figure out what it is that's really making you pod fade and address it. It may not even be that you need a break. It may be the way you're doing things. It could be your work flows off. There's so many things that plays into it, man. But first of all, you got to really think about why you are. Then if you have to take a break, then take a break.
When you approached me about doing this show, Podcasting Sucks, and also Good Morning Podcasters, and taking that over from Tanner, initially my thought was, man, how can I take on one more thing? I want to, but how do I take on one more thing? And immediately I thought, okay, I just need to make it easy and do it on my terms.
Yep.
And I told that to my wife as well, who was like, hey, how are you going to take on more things?
Yep.
But in that show, I'm not going to be Tanner. Right. Tanner's show was good. I have a different take on things. I have different life experiences, different work experiences, and a different viewpoint on this industry than he does. To quote some Stoics in some books that I read in the past, which will make him feel happy: live life as though your father is dead. So thanks, Tanner, but we'll take it from here. And, it's really, to me, that show is going to be, Good Morning Podcasters in particular, is going to be about things related to podcasting that live in the world that I work in all the time outside of podcasting. So public relations, social media, media buying, planning, those kind of advertising strategy things, because that's what I enjoy. And I enjoy this, and those kind of intersect in that, Venn diagram. And I'm hoping that doesn't lead to pod fade. and hopefully, it'll be an entertaining show for those who are listening, and people will learn some stuff too. And
I do think that when we initially started talking a little bit more, Fuzz, and you got to interact with more of the podcasting community, and by podcasting, I'm saying podcasters, not necessarily the industry per se, you almost get that. You do get it. I'm just going to say, you do really get a good, that's a good feeling when you're helping people.
right.
And I think you've tasted that a little bit, which is make this a little bit easier to do. But it's hard to keep that positivity, man. I think that's when, like you're saying, keeping it simple, not overdoing it, and being realistic about what you can get out of it will be important. But it's a feel good moment every time. Like we do Power Hour, right? Podcasting Power Hour every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, by the way. It's a feel good moment when we help people, man, or when we learn something, right? Like everybody's learning something. That feels good. And we carry this over in a lot of the work that we do.
Since doing Podcasting Power Hour, I've had, I'd say, a couple dozen DMs with people asking me questions about things related to what we talk about on those Twitter spaces. And, that's one of those things that I think helps keep me going is I'll explain something like, here's how to do this thing. And as I teach somebody about it, it gives me energy to know, you know what, like I do this in my real life job and I'm talking to you about this now, and this all intersects, and it makes me feel good about what I'm doing. And it makes me feel like I'm really engaged with this industry. So I appreciate
and I'll
those.
say
And
one thing, Fuzz, that's the work that goes unnoticed. I'm the same way. DMs all day, every day. I can't put that on a resume per se or something. That's what I'm talking about. The boots on the ground sort of work, man, that make a difference for the community, but you just have to continue to feel good about it. Sorry to cut you off, but
no,
I'm in the same boat as you. It takes a lot more time than just sitting down and recording this podcast or these podcasts.
There was one gentleman that came on. Actually, we had an episode we were talking about elevator pitches about your podcast, and I had a number of DMs, but I just remember like working with somebody and the appreciation that I got from that person one-on-one for helping them take their message, which they know what they're talking about. Their show is great. Their topic, they understand and sound like experts in, but helping them take them messaging and simplify it so they can say it easily to anybody who asks what their show is about was fun. And the fact that they were so grateful for the help, the free help, that like kept me going. I was like, okay, this is really cool because that person now can go and hopefully be successful, and I helped them, and nobody ever needs to know who that was or what show that was, but it just feels good to know that you were able to help. So,
and I think a big important part of that, Fuzz, is, and I'll go ahead and mention the individual because I know he'll love it. It is continuing to be willing to learn something. Don't ask questions and not listen. I think we all can be guilty of that sometimes. Some people are really bad about it, but part of avoiding this fading is learning more. So it'll be easier for you. It'll feel better for you. When we talk about our friend Ed Havens, right?
Yep.
He asked a lot of questions, but sometimes he was so stubborn. I don't know if he was really listening to the answers that he was asking for. But when he did, it's like a revival on the Podfade. He actually had taken 2 breaks. And once he took advice, he didn't just listen to all of it, right? He listened to it. Then he got his own version out of it. He took his own thing away from it, and he's seen success since then. So I think that's another big thing. Just continue to work with people. And that's partially why I do this. Cause when I started, man, it was like, I've been an underground podcaster. So when I started, there wasn't much help out there, but over the years, you meet people, they teach you things. And part of this is, I feel like it's me giving back to the community, I guess.
I think that part is invaluable. And for those who want to help and truly want to help, that's great. And if you have some niche, you listening have some niche that could help others in this industry, I encourage you, implore you to help out, come onto a podcasting power hour, lend some advice, help people to overcome some of the struggles that they have as they're trying to do this and try to learn. There's some people who are like super successful in their own business world and are trying to also podcast about it. And I think helping them out is great. I have some more superficial things that I do when I'm experiencing Podfade, Jeff. I don't know if you're interested in hearing them.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
So my number one thing, and I think this is something that gets me into the podcast booth no matter what, and my wife hates it completely, and that is I will buy a new piece of gear.
Yeah. Yep.
There's nothing that will get me more interested in podcasting than buying the shiny object and putting it in the studio, connecting it to the board or to the computer or whatever I'm doing, and testing that out. It's invigorating. And it could be, it could be a $20, I got this, this stupid, Rodecaster Pro cover, the Rode Cover Pro, $50 piece of clear plastic. I'm like, oh, hey, I'm going to go put that downstairs, make sure that my Rodecaster doesn't get dusty. And then, you get down here and start playing around. Some of the other things, downloading a new music bed and kind of reinvigorating the opening of the show, I think is always a good thing if you've got a music service that you use.
Or getting a new software, right? Trying something new. That makes a difference. Taking
a class, even if it's an online class or things like that. And you don't have to go spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars on that. You can go look up free classes on YouTube and things like that as well. During the pandemic, are you familiar with Second City? The comedy writers behind Saturday Night Live. They're took 5 Second City comedy writing classes. Every time that I took those classes, I just wanted to get in the booth and record stuff. So there's just some of the things that I do that are kind of superficial. They maybe cost a little bit of money, but it's a way to keep me interested. Podcasting is hard, and Jeff, podcasting sucks.
Yeah.
And we're here because we are in it with you. And I think a lot of the things that we are going to talk about on the show, people will relate to.
Yep.
And hopefully you'll take something away from this and it won't suck as much for you.
But if it does suck, make sure you tell us why it sucks.
Yes, exactly. And you can find us on Twitter at Podcasting Sucks. And eventually we'll have a website up. This is on the feed for Good Morning Podcasters and Podcasting Sucks. So if you're searching for it on your favorite podcatcher, search for Good Morning Podcasters, and eventually we'll send you to the website for you to go ahead and get on there and subscribe to the show.
Absolutely. This is like bonus stuff, man. You're going to eventually get into this several times a week routine for Good Morning Podcasters. Do this like once a week or something. It'll be that little extra cherry on the top, because we know that we've always loved this whole podcasting sucks thing. I know I have, at least.
I was disappointed when Podcasting Sucks went away. I can see the benefits of both. And I think that's why, Jeff, we're doing both. And we'll do it again next week. And are we launching these on Saturday mornings? What's the plan?
I think you said Saturday morning. Yep.
Yeah. So we'll be launching these on Saturday mornings and give you something to listen to while you're cleaning the garage, getting ready to do your own podcast. Hopefully maybe listening to these shows will help you find some more interest in doing your show and reinvigorate your interest in podcasting, even though podcasting sucks.
You said it beautifully, though. I can't add anything else to that. Perfect.
Well, Jeff, then we'll talk to you next week. And we'll also, of course, talk to you on the Podcasting Power Hour every Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. You can tune in to hear Jeff Townsend, Greg from Indie Drop-In. I come on when I'm not busy running the small village that I reside in, and can catch me on Good Morning Podcasters and find me on Twitter at GM Podcasters or at Fuzz Martin. And we appreciate you listening.
Yeah, appreciate you listening. You can check out my stuff at jefftownsend.media and podcast_father on the Twitter. Does it sound cool when I say the Twitter, or is that what the cool kids say these days?
Sounds chuggy.
Take us home, man.
All right, we'll catch you right here next time on Podcasting Sucks.
Big time.